How did Oneeye turn into a racist? Well, I'm gonna try and figure that out in this video. What events could have led Oneeye to commit such atrocious crimes over the span of his life, from his birth to his death? He's been a character I've talked a lot about on this channel, and that's mainly due to his persistence and ruthless behavior. He is without a doubt the most malicious dinosaur to ever be shown on screen. There isn't much to cover when it comes to his childhood. We can only assume it was a hard one based on his overall character. One-Eye's story actually overlaps with Tarbosaurus, the mightiest ever, the same as Speckles. In that documentary or show, I really don't know what you want to call it, the main character is a Tarbosaurus called Patch, and throughout the entire film no Tyrannosaurus was shown. Even in the movie that has One-Eye in it directly, he is the only T-Rex we see. Yet, we've been introduced to numerous other Tarbosaurus. In both Tarbosaurus, the mightiest ever, and Dino King, the Tarbos are the most powerful carnivores there. Even more powerful than the Rexes, as we see in the second Dinosaur King movie. Similarly to how Sharpteeth lived in the mysterious beyond, the Rexes may have been forced to live on the outskirts of the best territories already controlled by the Tarbosaurus. If this was the case, then One-Eye would have had a rough life from the start. With little food resources and competitions from his siblings as a chick, survival wasn't guaranteed. He was one of the lucky few of his kind that made it to adulthood, but still likely remained on the outskirts of the Tarbosaurus territory. This now starts to bring us closer to the movie he was actually featured in. So it is a common misconception that Speckles is Patch's son, because after he died in his own movie, his mate, which was Speckles' mom at the time, moved on and found another partner. They did have offspring together, but they were sadly taken out by velociraptors and a therizinosaurus. Speckles had 3 siblings, a 10-year-old brother and 2 sisters around 7 to 8 years old. It was weird that there was such a large age gap between him and his siblings, but it could have been his dad wanting one more heir before he left. With how relentless and arrogant One-Eye is, it's more than likely that he was the reason Speckles' father is dead, and how he lost his eye. The battle would have been intense, one in which One-Eye was now half blind, yet Speckles' father was left with mortal wounds. Speckles' father had won just enough to drive One-Eye out of the nest we see in the first movie, but One-Eye also would have gotten some shots in too. Similarly to how Patch died, he won the fight with the therizinosaurus that killed his child, but he died a couple of hours later from blood loss and broken ribs. The only difference here is that the enemy survived, which isn't surprising considering what One-Eye has lived through. It could have been in his final hours that he decided to have one last clutch of eggs or offspring with Speckles' mom, and since she neglected to do that for her old mate Patch, she wanted to give her newest partner a final dynasty. The fight broke One-Eye so much to the point where he left the territory but hung around the outskirts in the rocky valleys with a few items to hunt. Before I continue, there are some areas that could put a chink in my theory about One-Eye and Speckles' father so far. One-Eye's scar was on his face and has 3 marks coming down. It's either that Speckles' father landed an uneven bite on One-Eye's face and pulled, or One-Eye lost his eye from a velociraptor when he was younger and survived. Do I still think Speckles' dad and One-Eye fought? Yes, almost definitely, because there was no other reason for One-Eye to wait so long before deciding to take over the territory. As for Speckles' father, there is an ever so slim chance Patch could be his dad. There are some species of lizards and tortoises that can store sperm for more than 6 years until they're ready to use it. So, again, there is a very slim chance of this happening because of just how similar Speckles' mark looks to Patch's. But it could also just be a random mutation similarly to what caused Patch's. After some time had passed and Speckles was born, One-Eye started to observe the Tarbosaurs even more from the outskirts, and noticed that Speckles' dad was not with them anymore. With no other large male left to challenge him, he could take over Speckles' nest, but now there was a new problem. Speckles' older brother and sisters. They were subadults, but combined with the strength of their mom, it's unlikely that even One-Eye could have taken on all 4 of them at once. But he had a plan, an evil one at that. In the very first scene of him in the movie, he shows his intelligence. To avoid unnecessary injury, he pushed a boulder onto an ankylosaur's tail, rendering it helpless, where he easily then killed it. This thinking, along with his brute strength, is more than likely what gave him the edge in comparison to the other T-Rexes. One-Eye seized the perfect chance to eliminate his past rival's family once and for all. One-Eye saw that the family went out on a hunting mission and weren't focused on border control at the moment. So he finally entered the very territory he was banished from in the past and started a stampede that resulted in the death of Speckles' older siblings. The only one that was left was Speckles and his mother. With how spiteful and petty One-Eye is, he more than likely led the stampede on long enough just so that it could eliminate the siblings while leaving Speckles' mom alive, because she was in a different area when the hunt was happening. He wanted to savor the moment. He wanted to kill the mate of the very dinosaur that took away both his pride and possibly his eye. The fight doesn't last long and he throws Speckles' mother over the edge of the cliff, which leads to her death. He finally got the territory he longed for all this time. Now he did know Speckles existed because he saw him when he was in his old territory, but Oneeye more than likely assumed that the Stampede took care of him too, along with his siblings. So he settled down and started to eat and sleep on the exact same outcrop the Tarbosaurus family used to. This ease would soon come to an end after he returned to his kill after having a drink to find Speckles there with his food. He just stood there for a while, admiring the one he missed, the lone survivor. A chase happened, but he ultimately gave up after Speckles ran off into the forest. He lived on the outside for a while and thought the young dinosaur would have died after his first night with just how many raptors and other threats are in that area. 4 years pass and Oneeye still rules over Speckles' old home. This time, he's seen observing some Torosaurus. He knew that this was mating season and the males would usually injure each other. So he waited for a while and one got its horns broken off by a rival, which now left it defenseless. So chase starts, but doesn't last, as he's stopped in his tracks by a Therizinosaurus. If any of you watch Tarbosaurus the mightiest ever, you know how powerful these animals are. They can break ribs while causing piercing damage to the largest of predators, and with how long Oneeye has lived so far, he probably knew the risk. But like always, he uses his brain before using his strength. He lures the Therizinosaurus towards a tree and lets it strike, but just before the claws can get him, he moves out of the way, which causes the animal's claws to get stuck in the tree. With its main form of attack immobilized, he finally went in and took the animal down. As he was eating, a juvenile female Tarbosaurus called Blue Eyes tried to take some of his food. He wouldn't allow this though. These Tarbosaurs have taken from him his entire life, so he wouldn't let Blue Eyes get anything. He chased her off, but this gave Speckles the opportunity to snag a piece, which was then shared with Blue Eyes after she escaped the tyrant. It's after this instance where his obsession with Speckles would go to such great lengths, to the point where he would abandon the very territory he lost an eye for, just to ensure Speckles, the last of his rival's bloodline, suffered. 5 more years had passed, and Speckles and Blue Eyes had travelled far away from Oneeye and his territory. But with Oneeye having the knowledge of Speckles being alive, he tracked them down and decided to take them out. He first went for Blue Eyes, knocking her to the ground and then going right over to Speckles and roaring instead of killing him outright. He wanted to instill fear into the subadult dinosaur before killing him. Unfortunately, he was blinded by rage and revenge, so he didn't see the trap he was walking right into. Speckles had led him into a mud pit that was strong enough to trap an animal as big as a sauropod, as seen with the skeleton in the pit. Oneeye ran right into it while Speckles jumped over. It may have been able to trap a sauropod, but One-Eye's hatred for his rival's bloodline drove him on and allowed him to get out. However, he was exhausted after escaping, so he let them go this time. That would be far from the last time he would see Speckles, and the next time he met up, he would attempt to commit a crime that no other dinosaur has tried yet. 10 more years had gone by, and at this point, Oneeye was in his late 50s or early 60s, but the thought of Speckles being alive wouldn't allow him to rest. He travelled hundreds of miles over all these years, leaving behind the territory he fought so hard for just to put an end to Speckles. He finally catches up to Speckles after all this time and observes him hunting a Torosaurus. Speckles was now 20 and could take on adult ceratopsians by himself head on. Knowing it could be a difficult fight if he attacked head on, he decided to bide his time. He sees Blue Eyes and Speckles on a ledge and decides to separate them by pushing a massive boulder down, which knocks Speckles into the lake below as he was trying to save Blue Eyes. This is where One-Eye would attempt to perform the most heinous of acts, the one thing that can humiliate Speckles and his father. He would attempt to replace their bloodline with his. I'm not sure if that's possible though. I mean, they both are technically tyrannosaurs, so I guess it could be something like a wolf and a dog producing offspring. He tried to have his way with Blue Eyes, but she obviously resisted, and the more she resisted, the more he beat her up. Eventually he got to the point where he slammed her onto the floor and made her weak enough so she couldn't fight back as hard. Thankfully, Speckles came back up and intervened. The first time he saw Speckles, he was initially shocked, but with no other choice, he decided to engage. After all, he was older and had more experience. He tried to use Speckles' trauma against him, roaring the same way he did after he murdered his mother. This made Speckles freeze, and that left an opening for One-Eye to strike. He first rams into Speckles' head, not fully attacking him, but acting more dominant and stronger, even though he knew he wasn't stronger. He just had to make sure that Speckles believed that. He finally decided that it was about time that he killed Speckles, and was about to kill him the same way he did his mother that day. Unfortunately for One-Eye, this move only enraged Speckles, and he started to fight back like never before. The fight was one-sided once Speckles locked in, and One-Eye was thrown across the floor, tumbling multiple times in the process. After realizing that Speckles now knew he was stronger than him, One-Eye decided to forfeit this fight, but he wouldn't give up, not by a long shot. Age would have been a factor in this fight because Speckles was 20 and One-Eye was almost 3 times that. But in the second movie, Journey to Fire Mountain, You get to see just how powerful Tarbosaurs are in general, not just Speckles. Because of his pride and blind hatred, he lost the prime territory again, because after Speckles won the fight, Blue Eyes and him went back and reclaimed it. If Oneeye never tracked down Speckles in the first place and stayed in the nest, he would have likely lived there until he'd naturally passed away, because Speckles still wouldn't have gotten over his fear of the old Rex if he never confronted him. Speckles' life didn't get easier though. After he reclaimed his mother's territory, he had kids, but a massive volcano erupted, shooting out balls of magma all over the land. As they were traveling through a tunnel to escape, one of his kids got killed by a falling rock, and Blue Eyes got hurt trying to save Speckles Jr. Later on, Blue Eyes succumbed to her injuries, and Speckles and his remaining 2 children were forced to migrate along with all the other dinosaurs to a new place of residence. Once again, Oneeye managed to track Speckles down and observed him from a distance, although this time he didn't dare confront Speckles head on. So he started another stampede to separate Speckles from his children, just so that he could end Speckles' bloodline. After the herd of dinosaurs moved on and the dust cleared, he approached Speckles' offspring, looking at them with disgust and hatred. The first one he launched into the air where it was splattered against a rock and died. And just before he could kill the last baby called Speckles Jr., Speckles intervened. Oneeye hesitated again and thought about what he should do for a while: risk defeat and possibly even death, or retreat and live to fight another day. He chose the first option and tried to increase his odds of winning by getting to the high ground. He jumps onto Speckles aiming to bite his neck but misses. The two have a little scrape for a while, but Speckles ultimately dominates him again. During the fight, Junior gets knocked into the ocean, which distracted Speckles, and when Oneeye saw this opening, he tried to take it. But Speckles reacted quickly and slapped him into the ocean. Oneeye hit his back hard on the edge of a cliff before falling into the ocean. While that may have killed the average T-Rex, he just shook it off like it was nothing. He immediately looked for Speckles' remaining child, and when he found him, he swam straight towards the young animal, intending to kill it. Just as he was about to get Junior, he was slammed beneath the surface of the water. Speckles had jumped off a cliff and directly onto One-Eye's neck. They had a final intense battle, both drawing blood from the other. Speckles was extremely tired after days of traveling without food and walking many miles, so One-Eye was kind of winning in the end. But just as One-Eye finally thought he was about to end this Tarbosaurus and his bloodline, a 100-foot long Tylosaurus had decided to put One-Eye on the menu. But karma caught up to One-Eye and he was dragged to the depths and he was torn apart. And so the life of the half-century-old tyrant came to an end. A life filled with hate, envy and pride. Even though his life came to an end, his story will forever be remembered by Speckles until the day he dies, as the monster that killed his family and left just one survivor. So that's the entire story of One-Eye's life, or at least my interpretation of it. What do you guys think? Do you agree with my theory on how he became what he is now, or do you have your own theory? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, with that said, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.